All right, let's see how I do.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so we'll just go in order of your checklist. So the layers of the wall, there's no visceral, there's no parietal pericardium. The pericardial sac's been removed. The visceral pericardium is literally this outer skin here.
Yeah.
Okay, we can call it epicardium. Myocardium is any of the meat within. So any of the muscle that's underneath that layer is myocardium. So a good example would be putting
Thicker
a pin right
over
there,
there, yeah.
and thicker on this side. Endocardium is any of the innermost linings. So as soon as we're on the inside, any lining in here is endocardium. Okay. So any of the inner linings. Okay. Then when we get to the heart area, apex, obviously, base is this flat upper part.
Okay.
We're on the anterior side because we have no openings here. So we're looking at the anterior interventricular sulcus.
Okay.
And in that sulcus is the anterior interventricular artery. Okay? That's the only one. There's a vein in there too, but I'm not asking. It's not on here, so you only have to ask about the artery.
Okay.
So if I say if I had a pin here, I said what structure is that? You'd say it's the sulcus, the anterior interventricular sulcus. If I said what vessel is it, then you'd say the anterior interventricular artery. Okay.
Awesome.
The posterior one is actually here.
Okay.
And the way they've cut it, it's just a little weird, but that's the posterior side one, both the sulcus, and in that sulcus is the artery we can kind of see underneath. Okay.
Perfect.
Now, we don't ask about some of the other marginal arteries and some of the other ones. There's big guys we ask about, but not the other small ones. We'll talk about a few of those in lecture, though, a couple of the other arteries in lecture, but not here. Okay. Then we have the atrioventricular groove. So the groove actually goes all the way around. This is the groove here. It's going all the way around, all the way around, all the way around, all the way around, okay?
Yeah.
But right here, this is the coronary coronary sulcus. Sulcus, again, is the depression. Coronary sinus is the actual vessel.
Yeah.
And this drains deoxygenated blood from the heart in here into the right atria, and the opening is right there, and so you can see that I've just put it in. So there we go. We're now inside it. Okay. So
cool.
again, if I were to pin there, if I said what vessel, you'd say coronary sinus. If I said what structure, you could either say the AV groove, or you could say the coronary sulcus. Either of those is okay. There. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Now we'll move on to the chambers. Those are easy. So if you get oriented correctly, you're just going to say left ventricle, or left atria, left ventricle, right atria.
Okay.
Right ventricle. Then on the outside here, well, we might as well just do it now. The auricles are these flaps. So the whole thing, so again, if I was pointing here and I said, what is the chamber? You would say, oh, this is the right atria. But if I said, what's the structure? If I was pointing to this, the auricle is the actual, these flaps, and they allow the atria to take in a little bit more volume.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They kind of stretch, right?
Yeah.
And so, and they look like pig's ears, which are why they're called auricles, because it sounds like aural. So they look kind of like a folded over ear of an animal. Okay. So that's, I skipped ahead, but that's there. And then we talked about the thickness, obviously. So if you're here on the right side, you have a pretty thin wall because it's only pumping to the lungs. It doesn't have to pump very far. And you've got a really, really thick wall here that's like an inch thick because that's pumping to your whole body. So those are the differences between the ventricles. So then when you get into the vessels, you want to look and try to figure out where the superior and inferior vena cava are. So this is superior.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is inferior, and the way you can tell that is if they both go through like that, then you know they're going into the same chamber. Okay, now ours in human goes down a little bit more. It's not quite out like this because our heart is like that, not like that. So it comes out a little bit more than ours does, but there you can see that the both of them
Inferior.
and superior, right? Okay, now you pull that out. Okay. And then we just said the coronary sinus also drains. So in both of those are bringing deoxygenated blood into the right atria, and the coronary sinus we just talked about is bringing blood in. So those are the three vessels that are dumping blood in there. All right, then leaving are the pulmonary veins on the left atrium side, and they would be here, but they're all cut off. And you can actually see hint of, I think, oh, no, hold on. It seems like it should be one, but it's not going all the way through. Nope. I guess they had it cut. So one right there, two, 3, and there would have been a 4th one either right there or right there. Okay. So I can't pin those. So you can not worry about those. But they do appear on the model. 1, 2, 3, 4, the pulmonary veins.
Okay.
Yes.
Right? And those pulmonary veins are bringing oxygenated blood to the heart, right? They're coming in from the heart, like veins do, but oxygenated blood. So oxygenated blood's coming to there. Okay, then we have the pulmonary trunk, which is this guy, and it would branch off into the right and left arteries, and they are not shown either. So there'd be one here and there'd be one there. So on this particular one, that's why we don't have right or left. We just say pulmonary trunk.
Okay.
So where is it in that model?
So on this one, they don't have it either.
Oh, okay.
It would go here and then 1, 1. On your picture in your book, they show 1 here and 1 here.
Okay.
See that? Those are the arteries there. Okay? So you don't have to deal with that. Then we have the aorta, which is this guy. And on yours, you do have 2 of the 3 vessels. So some of them have this one cut as well. So when we go look at these, we have the brachiocephalic trunk or artery, and then we have the left common carotid, and then over here would be the left subclavian. But because these 2, the one that's not on yours and this one, are not there on all of them, I can't pin those, so I can only pin brachiocephalic.
Okay.
And again, on here, they don't even show them on that model, but they would go, if they were on the model, they'd go that way.
Okay.
There are coronary arteries that also are here. They are deep inside the aorta. They're the very first branches way down here, and so I can't pin those either. They're inside because they're bringing oxygenated blood to the heart first. So they're the first place that oxygenated blood goes. I wouldn't be able to pin them very well because I'd have to stick something down here and ask some question that made you know where I was really pinning because you can't see it, but they are there.
Okay.
So it's good to know that they exist.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then the heart valves obviously are pretty straightforward if you know what side you're on. So to find the right AV or tricuspid, you just look in here and you find, and you can even count the valves or the cusps 1, 2, 3. So that's the tricuspid, and you can call it tricuspid or not mitral.
Sorry.
Nope. Tricuspid or right AV valve. And I like to just call them right AV valve because it tells you exactly where it is and where it's going.
Right.
So it's fine to not use the slang terms. And then over here it's a little harder to find, but deep down is the bicuspid. It might even be easier if we look in here. The bicuspid's in there, and there's one big flap on one side and one big flap on the other side.
Okay.
Okay? So that one's fine. Now, the semilunars are also a little hard to see because they're way up high here.
Yeah.
So this one is for the pulmonary semilunar because this is the pulmonary trunk right here, and you can kind of see there's a flap right there and a flap right there. It's a little hard to see, but I would have to pin like right there. And then for the aorta one, it's even harder because it's so deeply buried underneath this aorta. But it's there. It's just hard for me to get at and hard for you to see.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's the aortic semilunar. Then the other structures, the ligamentum arteriosum is this bit of tissue that's holding the aorta and the pulmonary trunk together.
Okay.
So you're going to see that. And sometimes it's a little smaller than this. It used to be a vessel during fetal circulation, and now it's turned into a little thing that holds these 2 things together. The fossa ovalis is this oval looking window right there. You see that?
Yeah.
And it's got, and you can tell how thin it is because you can kind of almost see my finger going through it. So that used to be the foramen ovale, the opening for fetal circulation. And then it starts to close up right before birth and just after birth. And this little membrane forms, and now it's called the fossa ovalis. Okay. So we can only pin the fossa ovalis because the foramen is the opening that's no longer there. Okay, so one structure's in the fetus, one structure's in one in the fetus and one in the baby. Okay, so now we've got that. So fossa ovalis, and that's right in between the 2 atria, right? Each atria is on that side. So this thing is the interatrial septum, and in that septum is the fossa ovalis.
Okay, that makes sense.
We already talked about the auricles, the left and right, and the pectinate muscles are inside and this is hard. This will be hard to show because this one especially is a little dried off. But pectinate muscles are in and underneath here, And your picture has a book where they're holding the heart up to the light, and you can see these ridges in the heart, and they're only in the atria, and so your heart, it would be very hard to pin them because they're so deep, but they're way in the back corners here, and they also allow some expansion and contraction if you've overfilled your ventricles. So those are there, they're very hard to pin. In the ventricle, the interventricular septum is just the wall between. So this big thick wall. And then the papillary muscles, okay, so the way you want to know the difference, there's a bunch of bumps in here. Okay, a papillary muscle is something that has the tendinous cords of the flaps attached
to it.
So this big bump right here is a papillary muscle. Okay, but you'll notice that there's also other ridges. See, like that
don't have the
ridge?
cord.
They don't have a cord attached. Those are the trabeculae carnae, which literally means bumpy meat. So this is the bumpy part of the interior that doesn't have these guys attached. The chordae tendineae or tendinous cords, okay? Yeah, so if it's got a cord, you say papillary muscles. If it doesn't have a cord and it's a bump, you say trabeculae carnae. And then the moderator band, you have a very large one here, is this guy. He spans from one side to the other. He's ripped a little bit, but he's still attached. And he does a couple different things. He's going to bring a little of the electrical impulse over to the far wall. So it's a little way to get some of the electrical impulse over there a little more quickly. And it also prevents over-distension. It kind of locks in place so the heart doesn't get too over-distended. And so for certain animals in the way that their heart's situated and how blood flows, they want that. Humans, we don't need that problem. We don't have that problem.
Got it.
Okay?
Awesome.
Okay, so now you got